Thank you, Sean. This is really appreciated. I had a bunch of questions to ask, and you actually got to a lot of them. So very nice presentation. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Dale Peabody, and I am the Director of the Research and Innovation Office at the State of Maine DOT, and I will help moderate the Q&A here for Sean. So once again, Sean, thank you. Thank you for the nice presentation. We are using, for folks out there, we're using the Q&A function on the virtual meeting link. So if you want to just go ahead and type questions in there, and I see there's no open questions at this time. You also have the ability to give a thumbs up or something like that to a question that's already in there to kind of to bring it to the top. But I do see there, Sean, there was a question from Tony Donovan about the Girder being able to use, one of the technologies that Habib presented early on in his remarks, being able to use that type of girder and rail infrastructure. And so I don't know, and I was very impressed with the center out in Colorado. That test track. That's very impressive. I mean, what is the process that one would take to bring a new, for example, bridge technology, and to get that used or tested? Does it need to go through the center out in Colorado?
Well, the center is definitely an opportunity to test bridge technologies. Currently on the high tonnage loop, there are actually 3 bridge spans. That is actually industry research and helps support some work for AREMA, which is the maintenance away industry organization. I would strongly recommend, if folks are not involved with that, there's an entire structures group that deals with bridge technologies. That's a great place to start and start getting some industry feedback. And yeah, TTC is great because you can try things out, you can monitor what's going on very closely without the constraints that you would have in normal revenue service.
Sure, thank you. We do have a few questions showing up now in the Q&A box. There's a question, Sean, do field maintenance workers currently use any mobile apps to streamline their work, ensure bolts are tightened properly and maintain digital records of that work?
So the answer to that question is yes, there are digital devices that folks use to record their inspections. The level of that use really depends on the railroad, and there's a number of devices some railroads use in-house. There are some commercial packages available, but some of the smaller roads still rely on paper and pencil. So it really runs the gamut in the industry.
Oh, here's a question from Nadal. Oh, actually, there's one back up above. How would someone looking to get into this field of work? Looks like you can do some recruiting right now, Sean.
Yes, well, I was actually going to raise this point if nobody asked, but the railroads are currently hiring. I will say the workforce, the overall workforce from particularly the class 1s has really shrunk over the past few years. There's been a new operating paradigm called precision scheduled railroading that's come in, but the industry still needs people. And I'll say my career is, I will readily acknowledge, has been a little bit of a pink unicorn in terms of railroad careers, but I have to say it's been incredibly fulfilling and rewarding. I've told people I've never had the same day twice in 30 years. It's always something different every day. And, with my particular career path, I might have a week where I'm talking to the CEO on Monday, I'm out walking track Tuesday, I'm crawling under a train on Wednesday, working in the lab on Thursday and analyzing data on Friday, and then get called out and look at a derailment on Saturday. So it's it's one of the, I think, the few fields where you can do those types of things. You can be very hands-on, you can get into analytical work, or you can really have kind of both.
I just had memories of my uncle who worked at the local rail yard here in the Waterville, Maine area, and he was a machinist. So, and he worked for many years, probably 40 years for the local rail company. Is there any research being conducted to determine when rail components are getting close to the end of life?
So end of life is a kind of subjective term. So the TTC, the Fast Loop at the Transportation Technology Center, is really designed to look at that and how long components will hold up. Really, when you get out into a revenue service environment, whether it's a small railroad, a class one, a transit, etc., folks are, it's really about the inspection, and you're basing your maintenance and your replacement on the actual condition of the track.
Is there, oops, the questions keep moving on me. This was a data one. Is there an accessible source of data that is big enough to start looking for correlation between track factors?
There are some data sets that are available, not widely available though, and this is actually something I personally am very interested in, and we're trying to address that at FRA and even talk with the larger Department of Transportation about how do we make data more accessible for all of the researchers. The railroads, for liability reasons, tend to kind of closely hold data and don't want to distribute it out. So that is a bit of a problem, I think, for industry research, but we are trying to address that and find a way to make it available.
Thank you. My colleague Emily, she works at Vermont, the DOT there, VTrans. She was equally impressed by the test facility in Colorado. Her question is more around, do you think that, you feel like the research that's being conducted is being shared with the state DOTs? Do you think that the state DOT research managers could play a role in help sharing some of the work that you're doing?
Yes, so we do share results within DOT. There's actually a state of good repair working group that passes information about where we are with, say, concrete evaluation technologies, because we all have a part in that. So we'll talk about our different areas, our efforts in those areas. Specifically for, say, like a highway project that we've done within my division, is we looked at the use of drones at grade crossings, particularly to look at the hump for a grade crossing, because if the slope going into and out of the crossing is too steep, you'll hang up, particularly like low boy trailers, and then you wind up with a vehicle train crash. And so we've passed that information on to our colleagues at FHWA, and then they have subsequently shared that with the state DOT research programs. And we've actually had 2 states reach out to us on how they can start working with that technology.
Thank you.
As I said, that we expect other modes to become more involved at the Transportation Technology Center. So I think you will see more collaborative efforts as we go along.
Thank you. All right, Mark asked, this is a technical one, a new track design, are we still using core definition of arc?
Yes. Unfortunately, I don't think chords are ever going to go away, just because it's really the only method field folks have to go out and verify either the design or if there's some kind of exception. There's a lot of issues with chords. I really wish they'd go away, but unfortunately, it's just like that 1800s technology I talked about. It's the only practical way to do it.
Thank you. And this is a question I think a lot of people were thinking about, the new infrastructure bill. Habib mentioned it in his remarks. any early indications of how that might impact the, rail infrastructure?
Oh, it's going to be huge. There's $66 billion going to Amtrak alone, and that is going to be driving major improvements to the Northeast Corridor infrastructure, which has been aging. They're going to be replacing equipment. They're starting a lot of new state services. I'm constantly seeing announcements about that. I think one of the biggest changes is the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvement, or the CRISI grant program, which that is basically tripling in size. And those are grants that go to, primarily they go to smaller roads, I would say, for infrastructure upgrades, whether it's new interlockings, bridge replacements. There's money marked out in that for both locomotive modernization as well as grade crossing improvements and actually elimination programs. So that's going to be a major source of money. So there's a lot of money that's going to be coming into rail.
That's good news for everyone, I think, across the board. Clary has a question. This is an interesting one. About how long does it take, when you're doing research and to move the results from like proof of concept through testing into actual changes or implementation? Is there any rule of thumb that you have?
And unfortunately, that can be quite slow. Getting the technology through is probably the much faster phase of the process. It's when you're talking about updating regulation and policy that's where it becomes molasses. It just doesn't move along very fast at all. But typically, most of the research we're looking at is we're trying to kind of fill that technology gap of death. So we're looking at technology readiness levels of 3 to 6 is generally what we're trying to fund, because we think once it gets a little bit higher than that, then industry is ready to start using it or actually doing their own research on it. And you can find those technology readiness levels at the GSA website.
Great, thank you. A question here from Jack Sutton. Hi, Jack. So in estimating for restoration of inactive railroads, it seems automatic to specify new CWR. You probably know what the acronym is. I don't. The cost may add, up to 300,000 per mile or more. Is there an objective process for evaluating suitability of existing rail for intended use?
Okay, so CWR is for continuously welded rail. So instead of having joining track, you actually weld the rail together. In terms of ballast and tie conditions, so this is one of the struggles we face, and I didn't want to burn too much of the presentation time talking about it, but we have a number of new technologies, whether it's ground penetrating radar, machine vision, etc., where we can really take a good look at both ballast and tie condition, and really an objective look, and quantify that. But what we don't have at the moment is really, okay, exactly what do you need in terms of strength? Like I said, like I talk about with the lateral track strength, we don't really know what those parameters are. And that's some of the work we're looking at TTC going forward is, we want to build some tracks and actually, apply forces and try to shove the track out of the way and see what it takes.
Yeah, I know in the highway business, we have like fallen weight deflectometers and things like that,
Yes.
where we can apply load. So it sounds like something similar might be valuable.
Yeah, we're looking at that, but you also need to evaluate long stretches of track, and it's difficult with fallen weights.
You touched on use of drones. Maybe you did address this. Any thoughts on using drones for rail inspections?
There are a lot of people pursuing that concept. It's kind of difficult to define the use cases more than anything else. Part of the issue with drone inspection is you're seeing the track in a static condition. whereas track under the train may move around quite a bit, and you don't really know those deflections. For things like, standing water or potential flooding or things like that, yeah, it's a great use of a drone as opposed to having someone high rail the track.
Thank you. A question from Ian. First, he thanks you for the great presentation. Is FRA planning any new research related to direct fixation track technology, specifically life cycle improvement?
We haven't been looking specifically at that area. That's, with the influx of money that's going to be going into passenger rail, I suspect we probably will in the future, but at the moment we're not pursuing it.
Anything new or the latest on like composite ties and some of those types of different materials?
So there are a number of composite ties in test, both at the test center and out in revenue service. There are a few people who are, some of the roads are actually using those. And I believe we have a panelist that will be talking about that a little bit later in the day. So I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him talk about that subject.
Yeah. And I think Jim had a related question on the use of advanced materials. So I think we've kind of covered that. Mark had, okay, I have 10:15. There's just one final question Mark had about back to the ARC definition. Some agencies like LIRR asking to design with ARC definition. They say that equipment now can handle precision. It creates stationing problems. What should we do? Do you understand that question?
No, I'm not quite sure what that question is.
Okay, that's fine. Well, Sean, I tell you, it's 10:15. Your presentation was very informative. And the Q&A has gone quickly. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do the presentation for us and the Q&A. We are going to have to wrap up at this point. I hope, Sean, that you can continue to stay with us for parts of the day or most of the day for the other sessions. So thank you again very much for your presentation and taking the time.
Well, thank you for having me. And I have my contact information. If people have additional questions, please feel free to email me. And if I can't answer it, I'll direct it to someone who can.
Great. Excellent. Thanks again. So we are going to take a break now, folks. We'll be back at 10:30, and that's Eastern time for folks that may be in different time zones. So we will see you at 10:30 a.m. Thank you.